Okay, we've been looking at our person demo now for a while, where we took the Appfuse person demo and recoded it up so it was using the new JQuery Struts2 JQuery plugin tag libs, and we did a list, paginated list with the person demo. And I think in the last video we made some changes where we could do constraints, so we could check for duplicate email addresses and put a custom message in the grid edit box saying that it was a duplicate email. Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the actual application that we wrote using the Struts2 JQuery tags. And so here's our menu, and we have a few things here, and the application, basically what it's used for is it's a back end for a request system. So if a lot of the videos on YouTube I have are for this thing called Oracle Identity Manager, and it has a way to request resources. So you could request a resource saying I want access to application X and I want these roles and this privilege, which would include a collection of roles, and then send a request, and then that request would use the APIs to create a request in Oracle Identity Manager, which would send out emails to the requesting manager and blah blah blah. I think I have some videos on that requesting engine, and you'll notice that the Oracle Identity Manager requesting engine is not very pretty. So this is basically the back end to a custom front end requesting system. So a user could come in here and configure an application how it would look on the front end request system, and then someone could create the request and send it to Oracle Identity Manager for approvals. And we would use the Oracle Identity Manager approval engine to handle those approvals, and well, of course that would all be on the Oracle Identity Manager side. So this is what we're doing here, is demonstrating how we could use the new Struts2 JQuery tags with JSON and all the new fancy features with Struts2 JQuery, and how to write a pretty nice back-end application configurer, so to speak. So here we have basically user values that a user can configure. So when you request an application, you can define custom user values, and you could ask for more information about the request. You can also add roles. Now the roles part of this is basically a replica of the person demo. As a matter of fact, I used a lot of the same stuff from here to create the person demo. So this would be basically the same. So with the exception of this active flag here, so that's a little tricky with the list. But so we're just going to move on here to the privileges, and the privileges have some nice features in here where it works the same in that you have a paginated list just like you do in the person demo, and of course we use the same concept where you can click on one of these and bring up the editor. Okay, the difference being is now we have two tabs. The second tab also has an editable grid here, okay, where you could click and edit a record, okay, and you can also add new records to the grid that are also checking for duplicates. Okay, and you can change the fields here. Like right now our status is inactive. We're going to switch it to active, and then we can save the record. Okay, and we show there our privilege has been saved. Now we go back and look at our list, and we see the record is now active. Okay, so we have our roles here. Okay, so if we wanted to add a new role, and we tried to add role ID 1, we would get our role already exists message. Okay, so what we could do is let's try adding role ID 4. Okay, and you see role ID 4 has been added. So now we have new roles. If we wanted to edit one of these, you see here I don't allow it to change a role. Okay, you could, because we're doing duplicate checking, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But the only thing we want to allow on an edit is you can change the status from active to inactive, and that would be it. And you can. The nice thing about JQuery tags is that it has this neat feature where you can scroll through the records and edit them. And you notice that when I changed it, it was showing immediately because we have the auto refresh option turned on. Okay, so now let's go back to our list and take a look at some of these features that we put in that are different than our previous list. Okay, so if we go here, we're using the same thing. We have, with maybe one exception to the Spring Hibernate setup here. So we have our DAO just like we did in our person example. Okay, this is our DAO interface, and here's our DAO Hibernate, which is our DAO implementation here. Okay, and we did the same thing to check for duplicates. We modified our code from using the merge method in the Hibernate template to using save or update flush, which was forcing the integrity violation to occur, and that's how we just saw the duplicate message in our custom message to show up on the edit box. I guess the one main difference here is that we're using the repository annotation. Okay, and that's basically allowing Spring to auto configure these things on the fly. So right here we have the scan option turned on so that it's scanning for this annotation. Okay, and what that's going to allow us to do is to dynamically load this, and we won't have to actually code any beans down here for the DAO like we did with the person. So the person here, we had to code up this DAO Hibernate and pass it to session. Well, with that annotation we don't have to code this. All we need to code is our main manager here. Okay, so, and you'll see here that when we look at our manager class, of course the interface is still throwing that duplicate record exception. Okay, our manager implementation is doing the same thing it was in the person demo. It's calling back into our DAO. It's calling the save, which is forcing that exception to get thrown if it's an integrity violation, and we're sending back our custom message here. Okay, and again the difference here is that we have our priv-role DAO, and we have a method here, a setter for it. So anytime you code this annotation, whatever you have here, you're going to need a setter to be defined in your manager. And here we have our priv-role DAO, and we're setting it because it's passing it in for us. Okay, so we won't have the constructor like we did in the person class where we're wiring it in manually. Okay, so this is all going to happen automatically, and then all we have to do in our Spring config file is define the manager so that it gets injected into our action class, and then of course our action class has a setter for the priv-role manager. Okay, now so let's take a look at our list. Okay, so we have our list very similar to the person demo list, with the exception of this here. Okay, so if we look at our list, we have the status. Now the active flag is basically a yes or no in our database. So, but we don't want 1 or 0 to show up here. We want it to say active if it's 1 and inactive if it's 0. So you saw at the beginning of the video here, this was inactive and we changed it. Now, the way you do that with the new JQuery tags is you have to have a little function that dynamically fixes those up for you. And what we do here is we have this format status JavaScript function, and when the grid gets loaded, every record that gets loaded into the grid, JQuery is going to the plugin is going to call this method, and what it's going to do is take the current value, yes or no, the 0 or 1, and return active or inactive based on what that is. So here we'll go up here and we'll take a look at it. So you see up here we're passing in the cell value and some options in the row object. You can do more advanced things here with these values if you needed them, but for our case all we wanted to do is look at the cell value, and you see here if it's 1 we're returning active, and if else we're returning inactive, and that's how we're getting the active inactive actual text to show up in replace of the 0 and the 1. Okay, so, and we're also setting some sort options here. Okay, and we have some edit rules so that when we edit the record we can set requirements and hidden values. So we don't want the description to show up in our grid, but we want it to show up when we edit. So we have it set here so that it's hidden in the grid and visible when we actually bring up the editor, and it's required in the editor. So you wouldn't be able to create a new record without a description. So if we went here and tried to create a new one, let's say we want to try and create priv ID 01, and this would be a duplicate. of course, and we also have another thing here where the model is going to uppercase these for us. That's why these are all uppercase. So if we try to submit this, if I spelled it right, we should get a dupe, okay, because we're already doing the uppercase check. Okay, so we could change this to, let's say, a B, and then if we took this out, we would no longer get the duplicate, but we would get the description as required, and JQuery is doing this for us. Okay, so now let's put in the B description, and then we can submit, and now you see we have our B here because these are being automatically sorted for us on this value. Okay, and you see here the values that are showing up here are the ones that we have defined here. So you see here it showed 1 active, and then this is what's going to show up in the actual select box here. Okay, and then this is going to be the actual value that gets put in. So 1 will be the value for 1 active, and 0 will be the value for 0 inactive. Alright, now the other thing we're doing here is just like in our person demo, is we have our we're setting our model before we submit the record, and this is exactly the same as we did in the person demo, where we're just getting the fields from the post data and creating it in our model so that when these values get posted, Struts2 will automatically plug our model for us, and we don't need getters and setters for all of these. And the other thing we're doing here is, in order to pick up our custom message after our struts action runs, we're doing that check grid operation here, and it's the same thing. We're checking for a privilege added, and if the privilege is added, we return true with no message. Otherwise, we return the error message we have set up in our action class in this field. Okay, so now that's pretty much it for the list, and with the, like I said, with the exception of handling a select option here on our edit and handling the values that we want shown in the list when it gets displayed, this is basically the same as the person demo we did. Okay, now here we have the form. The form now, of course, gets a little different. Now we have some cool features in our form where when we edit the record, which, by the way, when we click the edit, again, I'll go back and look at that, the list, we have our ready function, row select, for the grid, and we're passing it to our editor here, okay, and passing in the ID. And again, this is the same as the demo where we have a struts action defined for these. Okay, so these are the standard privileged ones we have here, very similar to the ones we have for the person demo, and then in our JSON methods they'll be very similar to the ones we had again for our person demo, with the exception here is that we're going to have we have that second tab that's going to have some select options on it. Okay, so here's our list of privileges, here's where we're editing it, and here's where we're going to edit the roles in our privilege on our other tab. Okay, now if you look at our form again, now we go back to that. This is the form that comes up here. This is this form here. Okay, so you see what we're doing here is we're using JQuery tag lives, the Struts2 tag lives, to create our tab panel. Okay, so this is the same as our person demo with the exception that we have 2 tabs instead of 1 now. So we have our basic information, and we also have our privilege roles that we can put in. So if we go back to our page here, you see here's our priv roles, and our priv roles contains another grid, and we also have our basic values. Okay, so let's take a look at the basic